We caution young people not to be trapped into following the safe sex myth, which is both a lie and a fraud.
When the death toll from AIDS is steadily rising, should the Roman Catholic Church publicly oppose the use of condoms as a morally unacceptable remedy? Among our guests, a Catholic prelate who is at the center of the controversy, the Archbishop of Los Angeles, Roger Mahoney.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from New York, Forrest Sawyer.
Up to a point, the Roman Catholic Church agrees with former Surgeon General Everett Koop on the best way to fight AIDS. If you absolutely don't want to contract a disease which is sexually transmitted, you should remain abstinent. Your next best choice is monogamy. But Dr. Koop says that for those people who are not monogamous, the use of a condom is essential to help prevent the spread of AIDS. And it is here the Church differs. A draft statement now being prepared for the consideration of America's Roman Catholic bishops says that position is morally wrong. Education about condoms will only encourage sinful behavior. If the statement is approved, it will become a guideline for the nation's 55 million Catholics, as well as Catholic hospitals, schools, and social service agencies. They will be in direct opposition to U.S. public health policy. Will the Church, as some critics claim, actually endanger lives with this position? Or is it simply urging people to lead morally proper lives? First, some background from Dave Marish.
We caution young people not to be trapped into following the safe sex myth, which is both a lie and a fraud.
Archbishop Roger Mahoney of Los Angeles, presenting today in Baltimore the latest official thoughts of the American Catholic Church on sex in the age of AIDS.
We encourage young people to be just as responsible with their sexuality as we expect them to be with drug and alcohol abuse.
The advice is familiar, just say no. But the subtext is grim. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. In these United States, 109,167 Americans have been counted by the Federal Centers for Disease Control as having AIDS, and of them, 64,849 have already died. And according to CDC, between 945,000 and 1.4 million Americans live in the limbo of infection with the HIV virus, free so far of symptoms of disease, but full of the possibility of passing on the infection. It is in this context that the bishops of the American Catholic Church are gathered to consider a 1987 statement allowing educational information about condoms as a means of preventing AIDS, and to approve a new statement flatly ruling condoms out. As the new statement has it, promoting the use of condoms, quote, means in effect promoting behavior which is morally unacceptable. New York City Health Commissioner Stephen Joseph. If the bishops come out foursquare against prophylactics, you're going to see a result in your death data.
Of course we will.
But Catholic conservatives say not just physical death, but spiritual death is at issue here. As New York City's Archbishop John Cardinal O'Connor put it, after the Bishops' Administrative Board had made its 1987 statement that permitted dissemination of information about condoms.
The use of prophylactics is immoral in a pluralistic society or any other society.
It's one of the first times that I can recall where you had bishops in public disagreement.
From his position as professor of Christian ethics at the University of Notre Dame, Father Richard McCormick sees the battle of the bishops as, quote, in-house politics. But he says the question of whether information about condoms can be given to Catholics is important. And he says the new negative stance is unfortunate.
Insofar as they are going to be interpreted as saying no mention by anyone of condoms is acceptable, then I think that they will have to stand up and defend that position. I cannot.
The new church position condemns not only the immorality of condoms, but their effectiveness as well. The draft under consideration in Baltimore this week says it is, quote, a virtual certainty that reliance on condoms will result in transmission of AIDS. Contrast that with the advice of former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop.
The best protection against the infection right now, barring abstinence, is the use of a condom.
And one thing I want to talk with you about today is the use of condoms.
Michelle Kipke of Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx believes Dr. Koop. Her ARREST program is aimed at containing the spread of AIDS in one of its most virulent areas, the South Bronx, and among one of its most at-risk populations, teenagers.
The bottom line is that AIDS is 100% preventable, and that there are very specific things that people can do to protect themselves.
6 separate epidemiological studies show that AIDS is now hitting hard at America's teenage population, a population the ARREST program has shown is alarmingly ignorant.
What we found was that none of the adolescents had had any experience in purchasing condoms. Few had had experience with using condoms, and in fact, all of them used them improperly.
Ignorance in this case is not bliss, but, says New York City Health Commissioner Stephen Joseph, possible death. And he says both the ignorance and the deaf are hitting disproportionately hard at one of New York City's most Catholic communities.
The Hispanic community in New York City is an enormous risk. For Hispanic women, the risk of being infected in heterosexual transmission by a drug-using sex partner is particularly high. And we really have not had much success in New York City in seeing the Hispanic communities mobilize themselves to face squarely and frankly and actively the issue of AIDS.
Of the bishop's proposed new policy, Dr. Joseph says,
this would be a public health disaster. It would undoubtedly lead to more transmission, particularly in high-risk areas of the city, more disease and more death.
In this context, what might seem like just a theological debate carries more than just its philosophical weight. In the disagreement between Catholic liberal Charles Curran and conservative Al Matt, lives as well as souls are in the balance.
You try to get people to live the fullest of the gospel message, but on the other hand, you take people where they are. And when people can only take one step forward, you take that step forward. And somehow or other, to live with that tension has always been, I think, what the best of the Catholic pastoral tradition has stood for.
And somehow the notion has gotten through that we have to sort of meet people halfway or meet them where they live. And somewhere along the line, in making that attempt to meet people halfway, meeting them where they live, we forget what we're here for. We forget, that there are certitudes, there are absolutes, that every generation since the beginning has held to and has recognized as being true. And unless we insist on advancing those, we may fail. I mean, we may preach absolutes until the cows come home, and it may do no good. But that nevertheless doesn't discharge us of our responsibility.
Keeping the AIDS outbreak from spreading is literally a matter of life and death. But Catholics say the decisions they'll reach here are almost as important, relating as they will to the credibility of the Church with its communicants and its fidelity to its traditional moral values. I'm Dave Marish for Nightline in Baltimore.
And when we come back, we will hear 2 differing views on the issue from within the Roman Catholic Church as we talk with Archbishop Roger Mahoney of Los Angeles and Father Richard McCormick of Notre Dame University in Indiana. 1 year ago tomorrow, Archbishop Richard Mahoney of Los Angeles is chairman of the Bishops' Committee that has written a draft policy statement rejecting the use of condoms to prevent the spread of AIDS. He joins us tonight from the Omni Hotel in Baltimore, where this week's conference on U.S. Roman Catholic bishops is taking place. And with us from his home in South Bend, Indiana, is Father Richard McCormick. He is a professor of moral theology at Notre Dame University. Father McCormick is the author of a book about the ethics of dealing with AIDS and the moral issues it raises for the Roman Catholic Church. Archbishop, I think one of the problems that some people have with your position is a logical one. Why do you assume that education about the use of condoms will lead to illicit sexual behavior? For instance, why do you not simply say, have a program that says you should abstain from sex outside of marriage, you should practice monogamy in marriage, and here is what condoms can do to prevent the spread of AIDS? It doesn't address moral behavior at all.
Well, our position is consistent. The position in this draft document is the same as the document of the United States Catholic Administrative Board 2 years ago, and follows the consistent teachings of the church. What we're really saying to people is that God's revelation calls us to a higher way of life. We say that God's grace is adequate to assist us in living out our lives fully. And so we offer that as the way for people to pattern their behavior.
Well, perhaps I'm getting lost then, Archbishop, because I do see in 1987, the statement that was issued by the Administrative Board says that educational efforts could include accurate information about prophylactic devices or other practices as a potential means of preventing AIDS. That means that it could include the education about condoms.
Look at that section, though. That whole section talks about abstinence, about sexual responsibility, but it has an aside, and it says, for those who are not of our Catholic tradition, but in a pluralistic society, following a public education format in terms of sharing information, then something like this might be permitted, however, in the moral framework and context which we've just said. That's the difference between that document and this one.
Well,
this
at heart,
document,
would you recommend, then, that your social service agencies, that your schools, that your hospitals include in its discussions the benefits of condom use, or would you say we simply don't talk about it at all?
We didn't say that in 1987 for our Catholic institutions, and we don't say it today. We hold out to our people what we feel is the course of action to take in dealing with a dreaded disease. Just as someone who is prone to drunk driving, you don't say, well, we just give them half as many drinks and hope for the best. There is no such thing as condoms being safe. That is an illusion. And many people are going to get and pass on HIV infection through this faulty information.
Now,
we know that.
All right, sir, as to the health benefits of the use of condoms, we will have a public health official with us in just a moment. But Father McCormick, about the theology, is this a problem, the current bishop's position?
Well, I think it's obviously a glaring difference between the present document and the document of 1987. In that sense, I would disagree slightly with Archbishop Mahoney. There was a positive presentation of the toleration of education in what condoms actually could do, granting the fact that they are not absolute successes in preventing the spread of disease. Still, they can reduce the spread. Now, they mentioned this, and they said they would tolerate this in programs.
And not in Catholic programs, so.
They said they would tolerate it in programs in a pluralistic society because they realized, realistically, that not everyone is going to share the very high sexual morality which they proposed. I share that morality, but I believe that it's false to say that any mention of condoms in this context is the equivalent of promoting unnatural acts or morally wrongful acts or safe sex. I think that's a huge jump to say that simply to mention that condoms can do this and to tolerate that and to say thereby I'm promoting immoral acts. I don't believe that's true. I think it's a false inference, and if indeed
then
that
what is it promoting? What is it promoting?
It's promoting Archbishop, it's promoting public health to, put it this way, we have held traditionally for many decades, many centuries indeed, that if we encounter people who are going to drink and then drive, we say to them, please don't drive while drunk. Now that is not an encouragement to insobriety. It's not promoting insobriety. It simply says to them, if you're going to be irresponsible, please don't double your irresponsibility by killing people. Similarly here, if you're going to engage in conduct we consider to be sexually irresponsible, don't double your irresponsibility by passing along a killing disease.
Let us pause there if we could, Father McCormick. Forgive me for interrupting you.
Sure.
I want to bring on a public health official from right here in the city of New York, and we will talk about the impact of the church's position on using condoms to prevent AIDS with a leader in the fight against the disease. He is New York City Health Commissioner Stephen Joseph. That just ahead. Stephen Joseph has been health commissioner of the city of New York for the past 4 years, and during that time, the AIDS problem has been a major issue on his agenda. Dr. Joseph is with us now in our New York studios. Dr. Joseph, the draft that is under consideration in Baltimore, as you heard Dave Marish tells us, says that it's a virtual certainty that reliance on condoms will result in the transmission of AIDS. Is that so?
No, the reliance on condoms will result in a decrease of the transmission of AIDS. Of course, it's true that condoms or safer sex, the guidelines for AIDS prevention are not perfect. A few things in this secular world are perfect, but we saw an advertisement a few moments ago about seatbelts. Seatbelts aren't perfect, but they do work. They do save lives. And in the midst of this epidemic in New York City, 22,000 people with AIDS, 2,800 women with AIDS, 350 children with AIDS, we have to do everything we can to protect people against this infection. And condom education and condom use is a very important part of that protection.
Archbishop, Dr. Joseph is not alone in his position on the effectiveness of the use of condoms. The Surgeon General's office feels that way. The Centers for Disease Control feel that way. The National Institutes of Health feel that way. Why do you believe they're ineffective?
Not exactly. We're dealing, as Dr. Joseph said, with a very deadly disease. The more deadly the disease and the more awesome its implications, the more we have to be committed to take every course we can to make sure that disease isn't transmitted. To suggest to people that there is a half measure that you should try and good luck, I think is a terrible disservice. I think that kind of advice is immoral. We know what can halt this disease, not having people transmit that virus. And we know exactly what's required to do that. And we say that's what we should be focusing on. And particularly with our young people, giving our young people all these false messages. We say to them, do not abuse drugs, do not abuse alcohol. And we're saying, however, in this case, use half measures.
No, that's not what we're really saying at all, Archbishop. In this city of New York, 50% of teenagers are sexually active by age 16. I agree with you. We need to press that message of abstinence. We need to press that message of abstinence from drug use. But for those youngsters who are sexually active, who will remain sexually active, certainly from the public health perspective, which is the only one I can speak from, we have an obligation. As a physician, I have an absolute obligation to protect those youngsters by giving them information that literally can save their lives.
We should point out that we have temporarily lost our communication with Archbishop Mahoney. We are trying to return that, and we will work as hard as we can. Dr. Joseph, as I hear what you said in Dave Marish's piece, you said that if the bishops come out against prophylactics, your death data, that is to say the death rate, will reflect that. You mean to say that you believe that this statement will have a very powerful effect?
Well, of course it will. We have very good data from other parts of the epidemic of the effectiveness of education and risk reduction and condom use on reducing transmission of the AIDS virus. We have that data from San Francisco and from New York. We've made tremendous progress in this country in the last couple of years with condom awareness and with condom use. Should that be reversed? Should there be a very powerful sanction against people understanding the protective value of condom use? There's no doubt in my mind that will be reflected in increased transmission, increased cases of AIDS, and increased death.
Father McCormick, is there a kind of moral dilemma that the Church is going to have to weather through here? I mean, certainly Catholic doctrine says that any kind of sex outside the sanctity of marriage is simply wrong. But if Dr. Joseph is correct that the death rate will go up if the Catholic Church does not inform people about the effectiveness of condoms, then that presents a problem, does it not?
Well, surely, but I think you must distinguish very carefully a moral position which the Church presents very clearly on the matter of extramarital sexual expression. In that, I agree with Archbishop Mahoney. On the other hand, we're facing a public health problem here. And by saying that, you and advising perhaps those who will not adhere to your high morality that the use of condoms is in place as the lesser of two evils, you are not taking back your moral position. You're simply acknowledging that not all will see, understand, and put that into practice. And I think that's the confusion that I see going on in the bishop's deliberation on this matter. A confusion of the moral position with the public health problem.
If I can add a word on this, Forrest, it's not only a matter of extramarital sex. In New York City, of those 2,800 women who've been diagnosed with AIDS, a third of them got their infection because of heterosexual partner. Now, what are we to say to the monogamous married woman in New York City whose husband is a former or current IV drug user, and this woman who is not yet infected? It's not simply a matter of extramarital sex.
You see, Archbishop, that is the original question that I raised. Could you not offer, within the context of your moral teachings, education about condom use?
No, I don't think so. We're really talking about behavior. And what is happening in our country over the last several decades is we keep notching down the level of expected behavior. And the result of that lowered expectations is lower performance. And I think that is the myth. And all of us in responsible positions, both as religious leaders, public health leaders, moral theologians, we really need to call people to the higher road again.
Yes,
we get along.
I think we can do that, and at the same time realize that in our society, not all, in fact, very, very many, will not respond to that. And I agree, therefore, with Cardinal Lustiger of Paris when he encouraged people who are going to behave irresponsibly to use what
Father?
he called preservatives.
Yes.
Father, forgive me, I am out of time, and I am sorry that we have to be. It's a fascinating discussion. Father, Archbishop, and Dr. Joseph, thank you all for being with us this evening.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I will be back in just one moment. The bishop's draft statement is going to be debated on and voted on Wednesday. Of course, ABC News will provide coverage. And that is our report for tonight. I'm Forrest Sawyer in New York, and for all of us here at ABC News, good night.